just to start converting things in the detail view to make it look a little bit more professional, to use a phrase. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select these lines that go across the top, the cover of the parapet. Can you see all these lines here? And I'm going to select each one and make sure, obviously, you hold down Control to add to the selection set as you go, like so. So as you can see, I've got a little plus sign there where I'm holding down the Control key. And I want all of these lines to adopt one of the line styles available to me in Revit. So you'll notice that I've got all of them selected like so. And what I want to do now is change their particular line style. So I click here, and I want them to be wide lines, which is a Revit line style. And I then hit Escape, and you can see that stands out, and you can see that the top of the parapet, the flashing kind of, is highlighted much more obviously in the detail view. Now, you might want to do this with the bricks as well. Now, you'll notice when you hover here, if I click there, I've actually got a filled region for the parapet. That's what came through with the imported CAD drawing. If I want to create a new filled region that's a Revit filled region, I'm going to need to recreate that myself. So I would need to delete the CAD one, like that. And then what I would need to do is go to the Annotate tab on the ribbon, into the Detail panel, and into Region and Filled Region. And then what you do is you use Pick Lines, like so, and you pick all of the lines that you need to generate your filled region. Now, there's quite a lot of them, you'll notice. So what you need to do is just be real quick with this. I'll go through it very quickly, and we'll just go through and select each one as we go around, like so. So there's our filled region as we go around. Make sure you get the little arcs, they're important. So we're going to generate a filled region using pan and zoom. And then what we'll do is we'll select that one there. Don't select these horizontal ones, you'll see why in a second. And I'm going to just go around, and then I want that arc there. And make sure you get each line as you go. It's obvious once you select them, they go a nice black colour over the grey. But you want to make sure that you're forming a closed boundary. It's really important. So if I come into there, and then one last arc to select there. So that's everything going on there. Then we need to zoom into the bottom, and we go to the line tool now, and we go endpoint to endpoint. And then we do another line here, endpoint to endpoint. Then we click here on the tick. But before we do that, make sure you select a different hatch. Now, we haven't got a concrete one in there. So in our properties now, what we would do is we edit type, and we duplicate. And instead of diagonal crosshatch, we'll just call it concrete, like so. And then instead of diagonal crosshatch, we'll click in here, foreground fill pattern. And if we zoom up a little bit, there you go, concrete's right there. So I'll add that like so. So that's now my fill pattern for this new filled region. I'll OK that. There's the concrete there. Click on the green tick, and we've got a nice concrete filled region in place that looks nice and professional. When I hit escape now, that works really well. Now you can see as we start to come out of that now, we've got the concrete and we've got the flashing highlighted by way of just changing some of the lines and the settings in the parapet detail to make it look more professional as a Revit detail rather than a CAD drawing detail. We're staying in the office reception area.rvt file, and as usual, we're still in the detail 001 parapet detail. Now you'll remember we brought the CAD drawing through by way of import CAD file into the drafting view, and we've created the parapet detail from it. Now the text has come across and it's been exploded, so it is actually Revit text, Revit annotation, but it's all a bit of a mishmash and it all needs tidying up. Now what we're going to do here is we're going to tidy up the text first, and then what we're going to do is we're going to start removing the leader lines as well, because those leader lines came through from the import CAD file. We want to get rid of those and use our nice Revit leader lines that come off of our Revit text. So first things first, we select all of the text. So click and drag, like so. That highlights all of the text. And you'll notice in the Properties palette, it says Multiple Types Selected. Now, in this particular CAD Revit project, we've got various types, all using the Arial font. Select 2.5mm Arial, like so. And you'll see they all update accordingly. Click away from them, and it still looks a little bit messy, so we need to kind of tidy things up a bit. So let's select our 2 by layer with 12mm by 200mm. The good thing is you can select the text and just click and drag, and as you drag, you can obviously change that and make it longer. Now, if you make that longer, you'll obviously notice that these are 2 separate lines of text. So what I can do here is I can perhaps just go back a step here, and there's obviously a space there. And I can make that longer, I can make it shorter, it's entirely up to you. Really though, you could just leave it alone and click away from it, and obviously hit escape to select it, and it works okay. Same with the GI flashing there as well. This lightweight concrete one though, yeah, it's a bit of a mess, isn't it? It's sort of all stacked up on top of each other. So I'm just going to pan a little bit, and then I'm going to drag this to the left until it just becomes 2 lines of text, and then hit escape, and that looks much neater. So everything now all lines in nice and neatly, it's all justified really plainly, and it's all the same size, and it all just looks so much better. Now we need to think about the leader lines. So we've got our GI flashing. So the leader here, and if I hold down control, this line here, I can now delete those. And I've still got a fiddly little arrowhead, make sure you delete that as well. Now, when I select the text, the good thing is with Revit text, I can add a leader line going to the right. So there's my leader there. I can then click there and drag, place that down to the flashing, like so, click in the middle and drag, get that vertical, hit escape to deselect, and there's my leader there, nice and neat and tidy. Now, I'm not going to bore you, obviously, with all of these, but you kind of get the idea. So let's do the lightweight concrete over metal decking, for example. So that's here, that's that little bar there. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to select the lines. I'll delete those first. Then the arrowhead's a little bit clearer. Get that selected and get that deleted too. Select the text, add that right-hand leader there. And again, we're just going to click and drag, get the arrow pointing in the right place, click and drag on the middle button, bring it down so it's level, hit escape to deselect, and we're starting to convert all of that to Revit details. And the idea being is you want to convert all of that slowly but surely to obviously Revit text and Revit leader lines coming off of the text. It's very quick and easy to do, and you can see how quick it is just by deleting what you don't want and then converting the text to Revit text with a leader line. As usual, we're staying in the office reception area.rvt file, and we're in the drafting view detail 001, our parapet detail. Now you'll notice I have tweaked a number of things in our parapet detail. What I've done is I've changed the arrowheads and finished them off. They're now all Revit text with arrowheads. So if I select that, you can see, look, it's Revit text with an arrowhead. If I select another one, Revit text with an arrowhead. And I've just tidied things up a little bit by way of making the arrowheads these little filled arrowheads, if you get my drift. Now, all of these can be set up by way of the properties palette. So if I select that there like so, and then go in here to edit the type. So there's my 2.5mm aerial text. I edit the type and I change it to an arrow filled 15 degrees there. And locate it. And it's updated all of the arrowheads to that filled arrowhead instead. Now, I'm just going to hit escape there to deselect the text. Now, there are other things that you might want to change and improve in this particular drafting view. So what you might want to do is zoom in on the actual wall itself. So what we might want to do here is add some thick lines. So I might want to select these lines like so. If I hold down Control, and just make sure I get each line like that. I might want to make them wide lines instead of heavy, like so. And when I do that and hit escape, can you see it highlights the brickwork? So I'll do that again. So I'll just select each line. So there's one line, hold down Control, make sure I select the other lines, try not to get the filled region like I've just done, hit escape to deselect if that happens. So ideally, you might want to just get that line first, like so, and then do the other ones away from the filled region. It's up to you, just a little bit of sleight of hand there with the mouse perhaps. And I'm going to change that one to the wide line setting again as well. And again, just hit escape to deselect. So as you can see, it's starting to highlight the brickwork there and it stands out a lot more. Now what you've also got is a Kent strip down here. It's this little triangle here. And I might want to pop a little filled solid region in there as well. So I go to the detail panel on the annotate tab. There's the region, filled region there, and it might prompt me to save the project. I'm not going to worry about saving, and I'm going to cancel the reminder detail. I'm just going to sketch out this little area here. So I'm going to use the endpoint snaps as I come down. and come into there. There's my little filled region there. Now, at the moment, it's saying filled region concrete in the properties. Now, I don't want that. What I want is a solid black, like so. And then when I click on the little green tick there, I've got a solid black filled region. When I zoom out, that CAD strip is obviously a lot more obvious in the parapet detail. Now, I'll leave you to it. You can go in and edit this to your heart's content using all of the Revit settings, both in the Annotate tab, in the Detail panel, and so on and so forth. So have a go at that one and have a little play and get it looking totally different to what you brought in when you imported the CAD file into the Revit drafting detail. We're starting another new chapter now in our course, and we're going to look at imported categories in a lot more detail. Now, imported categories are what come in when you import or link a CAD drawing to your Revit project. So we're starting with a blank Revit project. Just start a new Revit project in Revit, and then go to your Insert tab on the ribbon, like so. And you're going to go to the Link panel and click on Link CAD. The drawing that you want to link is 00officeground.dwg, that one there. You can download that from the library for this particular chapter. Make sure you use this particular DWG as well, that's important. And also, just make sure that you've got your settings set up like I had at the bottom of the dialog box here. So colors, set it to black and white, like so. And layers levels, we want all of them. And import units, we want auto detect. Make sure that the little correct lines box is ticked. Positioning will go auto origin to origin. Place at level 0, which is where we are in the project browser, and orient to view. Make sure that that is ticked as well. Click on open, and that'll bring in our linked CAD file. Roll back on the wheel a couple of notches just so you can see all of the grid lines and so on. Ignore the elevation markers here in Revit. We're not going to worry about those at all for this particular chapter. They can just sit where they are right now. In fact, if you wanted to, you could hide them. It's entirely up to you, but they're not going to bother anybody sitting where they are. Now, imported categories come in when you've got a linked or imported CAD drawing in your Revit project, like so. So what we need to think about now is, where is that imported categories category? Well, it's on your visibility graphics dialog box. So just type VG, that'll bring up the dialog box, and then you go to imported categories here, like so. And there you can see the 00officeground.dwg file. Just expand it by clicking on the little plus sign, and there's all of the visibility, the layers that have come across with our linked CAD file. And there's lots of settings here to look at. We can look at visibility, projection surface lines and patterns, halftone, and so on. So there's a lot of information that you can utilize here to use your linked CAD drawings. Now, importantly, the one thing you'll notice is all of the layers here are adhering to the AutoCAD standard. And that was BS 1192, remember, from previous chapters. So basically, everything that's coming is adhering to the appropriate standard that you're working to in your Revit project. That's the whole idea. You make sure that your AutoCAD linked CAD drawings adhere to the same standard as the standard you're working to in Revit. So what we'll do as we go through this chapter is go through all of these settings and overrides and everything and work out how they work and see how they work in our Revit project. We're staying in our visibility graphic overrides dialog box, and I've left it exactly as it was at the end of the last video. Now, the most important sort of category in imported categories is visibility, this one here, because that's where everything that has come in with the 00officeground.dwg file is shown. Now, what I'm going to do first of all is just expand the column a little bit. So if you hover over the line there, can you see the double arrows? Just drag that across to the right, and then you can see all the names of all of the layers that have come through as imported categories with our DWG file. Now you'll notice that the visibility, everything is ticked by default. Now here's a really cool trick. If you have got a linked CAD file and you want to keep it available to you, all you can do there is click there, and now when I click on OK, it's not showing in the Revit project, but it's still there. That's the benefit. I can switch it on at any time. So it may be that you're using it for reference. You've used what you need from the linked CAD file for reference, but you might need it later. You can then just literally, as you can see, turn it off. If I go back and type VG again now and go back to imported categories, it's still there. I'll expand it out, click there like so, and OK it, and it's back again. So that's a really nice feature, just to kind of lose all of the linked CAD files straight away. That's a really nice feature. Now, a lot of the time when you're linking CAD files, there's a lot of extraneous visual information that you don't actually need to see. So for example, you've linked your CAD file, you've utilized all of these grid lines to create your structural grids in Revit, and you're starting to draw all of the walls as well. Now, the walls themselves you want to stay, but you want to lose the grids. How do I hide those grids in the linked CAD file? Well, that's real quick and easy. Again, visibility graphics, VG on the keyboard, into the imported categories, expand out the visibility again, and I'll switch off grid and grid references. All I want to see is the actual geometry of the walls, doors, windows, etc. So when I OK that, I've now got a much clearer view of what's going on. I can see the walls, doors, and windows without those grid lines getting in the way. But more importantly, you can snap to a linked CAD file when you're generating Revit objects. And you don't want to keep snapping to intersections of grids and things. The only time you really need that is when you're placing things like columns. So once those columns are placed and the grid lines are placed, and you want to start adding walls, and then you can start adding walls based on the linked CAD file here, you can kind of switch things on and off. That's the benefit of the visibility. So I'll just go back to VG here and back into my imported categories, expand it out here, just make sure that they're switched back on again, click on OK, and there's our full linked CAD file once again. Obviously, everything is now visible, but as you can see, you can switch anything on or off at any time using the imported categories in the visibility graphics dialog box. Depending on the type of linked CAD file that you're using, you can also provide overrides on things like lines and patterns as well. And patterns in Revit are basically the equivalent of hatching in AutoCAD, just so that you know. What we're going to do is we're going to stay in our sort of default Revit project with our linked CAD file, as you can see on the screen. And I'm going to zoom in on this area here, top left. So just literally roll upwards on the wheel, zoom in, do a little bit of panning, get it central on the screen, like so. Now, what you'll notice there is all the internal walls are using a solid line. Can you see that? They've all got a solid line going on at the moment. Now, it may be that you want to change the line that you're using there. You might want it to be a dashed line, for example, and you might want it to be a different color to highlight an area in the linked CAD file ready for somebody to work on in Revit and perhaps start generating that part of the model first. Now, that's a very, very simple example, but it's actually really quick and easy to set this kind of thing up. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to select our actual linked CAD file. Now, in order to select that, you might want to do a little crossing selection like that. And as you can see there, it highlights everything. So I'm going to go up here and query now, like so, and I'm going to come down, I'm going to query that line there. And it tells me it's on layer level A200M wall. Can you see that there? So I'll just OK that now. And then what I'm going to do is I'm now going to do VG, brings up the visibility graphics again, and I'm going to go to imported categories, expand out the visibility like so, just make that column a bit bigger again so we can see everything. And I'm looking for this layer there, like so. So there's our A200M wall. Now I can, in the override there, obviously override the lines. You'll notice patterns. Can't do anything with that. Why can't I do patterns? Well, that's because there aren't any, basically. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do an override, and I'm going to change the color. I want it to be red, for example, so it stands out. And the weights there, I might change that to, say, a 5. Now, the weight, we've covered that already in previous chapters, will give a thicker line weight, basically, similar to line weights in AutoCAD. And the pattern, I'm going to go and choose a pattern there. I've got all different ones, but what I really like about Revit now, look, it gives me the red of the color in the list, which is kind of handy. So I'm going to go to dash there. Dash will be fine. So I want a dash line on it red with a weight of 5, and I click on OK. There's the override highlighting in the list. So what I can do now is apply that and OK it. And you'll notice that everything that uses that particular layer now has that dashed line. Now you'll notice it's only certain walls that have done that. And you can see there, when I go in and go out, it's that wall there. Can you see? And that wall there. So they've all used that particular layer. So what I'll do now is I'll go back to visibility graphics, type VG, back into my imported categories. I want to switch that off now. So I come back here, click in here like so, click once again, clear the overrides. It defaults back to its default setting. I'll OK it. OK again, and it's back again like so. So that's how quick and easy it is to add one of these overrides to your lines or possibly your patterns if they're there, but there aren't any patterns in this case. But you've got doors as well. So let's do another query. Let's do a little crossing selection there. Select our linked CAD file. I'll do a query again and I'll check what layer the door is on. Now that's on the A325M door layer, so I can check that now. I'll type VG again, like so, into the imported categories and just expand it out once more. And notice I've got no patterns. I can only do halftone. I've only got lines. That's because it's basically a 2D CAD drawing that I've linked. So I'll expand that column again, and I'm looking for that M door layer there. So I add another override. This time I'll change it to dash, like so. I'll give it the red color again. And this time I'm going to go with no weight override. I'm just going to leave it as it is. I'll click on OK, click on OK, and you'll see that my doors now, can you see they're dashed? And it does depend on what layer, what part of the door it's using. Can you see that? The actual door itself, the physical door, is obviously on a different layer. But all the other extraneous parts of the door are using that layer that I selected and put the override in on. So if I just double click on the wheel to zoom extents, you can see all the doors have that dashed red feature thing going on like so. So I'll just type VG again and go back to my imported categories and just switch off that override. There's the override there. Click on it, click again. Clear overrides, OK there, and everything is back to the way it was before. So you can see how useful those lines are in, obviously, your linked CAD drawings in your Revit projects. Once again, we're utilizing a blank default Revit project, and you'll notice this time that we do not have a linked CAD file, and that's for a reason, because I wanted to use a different DWG file this time to link into your blank Revit project. So you've got your blank Revit project open. Go to the Insert tab on the ribbon, into the Link panel, click on Link CAD, and this time I'd like you to use this file here. 00 Office Ground R2 Revision 2.dwg. Again, you can download it from the library and utilize it to follow along with this particular video. Now, as you can see, it's a DWG, and all of the settings are going to be the same as they were previously. So black and white, layers levels all, auto detect, make sure your correct lines is on, positioning auto, origin to origin, place at level 0, and make sure you orient to view. Click on open, and in comes your linked CAD file. Now, if we zoom in on this area here, you'll notice in revision 2 of the linked CAD file, there's some differences. And you can see there's some hatching there, basically. And that hatching is on its own layer in the linked CAD drawing. Now, what I want to go into is object styles. Now, imported categories in Revit have specific object style set. Now, because we've started with a blank Revit project, we're just using the default settings for object styles. And those object styles you can find on the visibility graphics dialog box. So we type VG, like so. We go into the imported categories tab, like we've done previously, and we'll expand everything out here like so. Now you'll notice we've got some different layers in this linked CAD file. We've got at boundaries, at room areas, and at viewports was already there. Anything with an at in front of it are basically layers that I want you to look at. Viewports, obviously, self-explanatory. They would have come across with the linked CAD file. But it's these two here, room areas and boundaries. And basically what somebody's done is they've put some boundaries in, some closed polylines, and then they've hatched them to give us room areas and highlight room areas in the plan view in the linked CAD file. So they've come across to level 0 with our linked CAD drawing in Revit. Now I want you to go down here to object styles. There's a little button here. If I click on that, it opens up another dialog box. And there's our imported objects there. There's our imported linked CAD file there. If I expand that out, basically what you've got now, there's all your layers in the linked CAD file. You can now specify exactly what you want here, and you can modify the subcategories by adding more as well, which is kind of useful when you think about it. You can add more subcategories to a linked CAD file if you want to, or anything else that may come in. So if you think about it now, if you modify these subcategories, all of these ones here, you could actually have more categories that may come in from other drawings as well, other different layers. So you can actually set all of this up, so all your subcategories here do exactly what you want whenever you bring in a CAD drawing. Now at the moment we've just got the default settings, which tend to be all black and solid. So we might want our room areas here, instead of using a black solid line, we might want the room areas to use a red line, like so, and the line pattern, we don't want a solid line pattern. We want a dashed line pattern on those highlighted room areas. Now, room areas, that layer in the link CAD drawing is the hatch layer. And you've got the material there, rendered material. That's if you're bringing in 3D models with rendered materials, which we're not. So that's all set up. I can rename this if I want to. You don't want to rename it because you want to make sure that this comes through from the link CAD drawing. So what I'll do now is I'll apply that and I'll OK it, and then I'll OK it again. And you'll notice now whenever that particular layer comes through from a linked CAD file, that at room areas layer, it will always have this property. It will always be red and dashed, for example. So if I zoom in real close to that now, you'll start to see that that is a nice red, what you see is what you get kind of color. So if I go back to that imported categories again, go VG, back to imported categories there, expand it out, go to object styles, like so. If I expand that out again, like so, there's my red and so on. Now, the line pattern dash, obviously the dashes are a little bit too small for that particular hatch pattern. Now, that hatch pattern, for example, is all drawn in millimeters. So I think if I remember rightly, when we looked at the dash line pattern, it was 3 millimeters dash, 3 millimeters gap. That's not going to show very well on a big, massive drawing like that. So you might need to create a new dash line pattern in Revit to obviously cope with that size. That's all the problem is there. It's a bit like in AutoCAD when you've got something like a center line and the LT scale is out of whack a little bit. So that's something that you might have to look at later on. But what we've got there is colors, and we can change anything. So we could highlight our boundaries as well. Let's make sure that they're a nice bright color. Let's give them a nice bright green. So there's our boundaries there. And what we might want to do there is keep that as solid, but we might change the projection so it's much bolder. So let's give that a 5, for example. So I'll apply that now, I'll OK it, and I OK it again. You'll see that your boundaries stand out nice and bold in that particular link CAD file. But if you link any other CAD files now that have that particular layer name, they will also come through green and bold, like we've just set those ones up there. So that's what your object styles are all about. You can make sure that all of your object styles are set appropriately to the settings you want them to be in relation to any standards in any linked CAD files that you're bringing in through from AutoCAD. So object styles are really, really quite important. You need to make sure that you've got those all set up the way you want them so that when you bring in your linked CAD files, they display in the way that you want them to in your Revit projects. The other setting that's really, really useful when you're using imported categories is halftone. Now, up until now, we've been working on specific elements of the linked CAD drawing and the imported categories, plus the object styles. So what I'm going to do now is just double click on the wheel to zoom out completely so that we can see the whole of the linked CAD drawing, grid lines, grid bubbles, etc. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to type VG to bring up the visibility graphics overrides again in the dialog box. And I'm going to go up to imported categories here like so. And I'm just going to expand out the visibility column and make it a bit bigger again, just so we can read all the names. Now, you'll notice halftone is only available for the whole linked CAD file. That's normally the case. And all I've got to do is click it like that. That'll make it halftone. I click on OK. And you'll notice now that everything goes halftone, even the object styles do. But the benefit you've got now is you can still see everything in your Revit project, but you can start adding elements. So, for example, with that halftone like that, I could go up to the Architecture tab, and I want to start adding my grid lines. So if I go to Grid here in the Datum panel of the Architecture tab, what I can do now is I can use Pick Lines here, and I can just literally pick the lines, and you'll notice I'm adding structural grid lines in Revit over the half-toned linked CAD drawing. So as I come across like this, I can add all of my grid lines like so, and the halftone means that they stand out. Can you see that? They're a bold black, and the halftone ones on the actual linked CAD file are staying that halftone grey colour. So I've got everything I need there. I've got all my grid lines in place. Obviously, don't worry about the bubbles. You can change those and change them to A's and B's and 1s and 2s. But what I'll do now is I'll hit escape a couple of times just to come out of that grid command. Now, you can see there now when I zoom in real close which bits are the Revit structural grids and which bits are the linked CAD file. The other benefit I've got now as well is if I go back into my visibility graphics, I'll just center that on the screen. If I now do VG like so and go imported categories, I'll expand out the visibility and I'll just switch off the visibility for the whole linked CAD file by unticking that there. Click on OK, and there's all my grids neatly placed, making sure that I can see the grids, but more importantly, the halftone was the bit that allowed me to place those grids. I could see the grids on the link CAD file, but because they were halftone, I could also distinguish the structural grids that I was placing in my Revit project as well. So what I'll do now, I'll go back to VG again, go back to my imported categories, just switch that back on like so, click on OK, and there's my linked CAD drawing in halftone underneath my nice new Revit structural grids. We're starting a new chapter now, and we're going to start looking at annotation in our Revit projects. Now, the benefit of annotation in Revit is one, it's really easy to use, and two, it's really easy to edit the family types of the annotation to match the standards of the AutoCAD standards we may have. So what we've got is a new Revit project for you to open. Now, you'll recognize it. It's Office Reception Area.rvt. You can see the name of it there at the top of the screen in the title bar. So make sure that you open that particular Revit file from the library downloads that you may have downloaded already. But make sure you use this particular project, Office Reception Area.rvt, for the annotation chapter of the course. Now, I'm in the detail 001 parapet detail. You'll remember that from previous chapters in the course as well. And you can see it's all looking nice and neat and tidy. It's all Revit objects now. So you've got Revit leader lines, you've got Revit annotation text, you've got some wide lines on the brickwork and the parapet cover there, the flashing and so on. What we're going to do now is we're going to start working with the annotation, changing the styles, updating things, making them look better, basically. You've got Revit now as a tool for developing your projects. Utilize the settings in Revit to make everything look the best it can be. So we're in the parapet detail 001, and we're in Office Reception Area.rvt. Just get to there first, and then we'll start looking at all of the annotation details as we work through the videos in this chapter. We're staying in our Office Reception Area.rvt file, and we're in the detail 001 parapet detail view. You can see that in the project browser over here on the right hand side, and you'll recognize the parapet detail, obviously, as I explained in the previous video. Now, annotation and text in Revit is defined by system families. So if I go and select a piece of text, let's go for GI flashing here, like so. As soon as I select it, what you'll notice is I've got the ability to modify the text notes up here on the ribbon. Everything goes green and you get a modify contextual tab, like you do with every other object in a Revit project. And you'll see that you've got some pretty cool tools there, actually. You've got the leader panel, the alignment panel. You've also got check spelling, find replace, but you've also got some really cool editing tools here as well. I can edit the alignment of the leader there using the dots, and I can also move and drag the text and also rotate the text note if I want to. More importantly though, we need to look over at the properties palette, the text families over here. So you'll notice that we can have arc leaders if we want to. So if I tick that there, I can have an arc leader if I want to. I can have left attachment, top, bottom, and so on. Keep it readable as well, and everything else. So all of that information there is in the properties palette. The bit I'm worried about is the actual system family. How do I get to that? Well, at the moment, the text is 2.5mm Arial. So it's an Arial font, 2.5mm high. Now, the lovely thing about Revit is it looks at the scale of the view here, 1 to 10, and scales up the text accordingly. So that text is actually in real life, so to speak, 25 millimeters high for the 1 to 10 scale to make it 2.5 millimeters when you put it into a sheet to plot it. Now, that's one of the things that Revit does kind of automatically. It's a really nice feature of Revit. But let's say I want a different sized family, or I want a different height family. So what I can do here is I can go and look in my existing group of system families here. So I click on the fly out there in the properties palette. This is kind of like my lookup to see what I've got loaded in this particular Revit project. So you can see there that the smallest text I've got, the lowest height text, is 2.5 millimeter area. I want that to be smaller, and basically I might need to edit that. So how do I edit it? Well, it's really, really easy. What I do is I go to Edit Type, like so. And this brings up the Type Properties dialog box. I'm just going to pop that over there, sort of to the right. So at the moment, we're in the system family text, and the type is 2.5 millimeter Arial. That's what you get over here in the Properties palette. Now, I can duplicate that and generate my own family. So I can duplicate it, give it a new name, and I can then obviously add all of these parameters. And that's what you do with your families. You change all of these settings in here to create new families of different types of text. So different heights, different fonts, bold, italic, underline, all that kind of stuff is in a system family. And it's a bit like creating text styles in AutoCAD, but in a slightly different workflow. And what we're going to look at as we work through this chapter is to get our text the way we want it in our parapet detail. So we'll start creating some different types of families using different settings. But that's how you get into the families first of all, duplicate them, obviously, and then change the settings. So you're in essence copying a family type, changing the settings and giving it a different name, a bit like a text style in AutoCAD. We're staying in the detail, our one parapet detail view in our office reception area.rvt file. And what we're going to look at now are those family types that we looked at in the previous video. So we're going to look at creating some new text, some new family types that have different fonts and different sizes. At the moment, our text in our parapet detail is using one of the default Revit fonts and heights, which is Arial 2.5 millimeter high. So that's one of the defaults that you get whenever you start a blank Revit project and start creating from scratch. Now, the benefit you've got is obviously before you start creating any Revit project, you could set up a Revit template and it could have all of these system families in it. You just save it back as a template in the same way you would in AutoCAD. You take a drawing, set all the settings up, save it as a DWT file. You can do the same with Revit and save it back as a Revit template, so that all of those system families are in place every time you start a new project. Now, obviously, we're just doing a one-off in this case for the parapet detail, but think about that when you're working with your Revit projects. You want to make sure that all of your family types, especially things like annotation, text, font, sizes, are all set up to the same standard as they are in your AutoCAD drawings. It's quick and easy to do, and if you save it as a Revit template, they're there every time you start a new Revit project. It's just a workflow and a process that you need to get yourself into, rather than just start with all the blank default Revit settings. Set yourself up some Revit templates like you would setting up some AutoCAD templates. It's a quick and easy thing to do. Anyway, I digress. Let's get back to the fonts and the sizes of our annotation in our parapet detail. So if I select that GI flashing again, you can see it's using text 2.5 millimeter Arial. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to Edit Type, like so, and I'm going to bring the Type Properties dialog box just to the center of the screen. So these are system families. They're always there. You can't erase them or anything like that. However, you can duplicate and create new system families based on the default existing ones. So I want a different font, and I also want a different text height. So I'm going to go to Duplicate here, and I'm going to call this 2.02 millimeters. I want it to be Calibri. So make sure I spell this right, because I often spell this wrong. There we go, Calibri, like that. And I'm going to click on OK. So that's the name of my family type there, 2.0 millimeters Calibri. So I need to change the settings now, the type parameters for that system family. So color, I'm going to leave black. Line weight, I'm going to leave with a projection of 1, which gives it that kind of default setting. Background, obviously opaque. Do I show the border? Now that's an interesting one. Let's do that. Let's switch that on with a border, see what happens. The leader border offset 2 millimeters, that's perfect. And we've got a leader arrowhead. If we use leaders off of the text of an arrow filled with 15 degrees, that's what we've already got there. Those are those filled arrowheads there. So that's fine, but it's the font and the size I need to change here. So I need to go in here, change my font. So I just hit the C there. There's Calibri, like so. Did you know that, by the way, in any drop-down menu like that, if you press the keyboard letter corresponding to the beginning letter of the subheading you want, it will find it. So I just press the C key on the keyboard, sent me straight to Calibri because it begins with C. Text height there, I'm going to change to that 2.0 millimeters, like that. Tab size, 12.5 millimeters. That's absolutely fine. Do we want it bold, italic, or underlined? Not at the moment. Do we want to change the width factor? Not really. So I'll okay that now. And you'll see that that text is changed. If I just hit escape now, you've got a little box. That's the border in that particular family type. And that actually looks really quite professional and nice, doesn't it? So what we'll do now is we'll select all of these, the other bits of text, and we'll change those to the same font and size as well by going into the properties. There's our 2 millimeter Calibri. Thank you very much. And what I'll do now is I'll just hit escape to deselect, and you'll see that they've all got those boxes. Now the problem is, and this is something in Revit that is a little bit of a niggle with me, is the borders of the text actually follow the area that is specified for the text as well. So what you've got to do here is you've got to select your text now and just drag these to make sure they fit, like so. So if I do that, escape, can you see the border now follows it like that? Now, obviously, you've got a bit of crossover there at the bottom, so it's starting to look a bit messy. So the trick there now is to go and select one of these, edit type, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to switch the border off. I'll okay that. And they all update, but if I just hit escape now, that text and those arrowheads, it now looks just a lot neater and a lot nicer using that Calibri font. Now, you don't have to change everything in your Revit projects to a different font and a different height, but in the details, sometimes a smaller height font with a different kind of text like Calibri or perhaps something else other than Arial helps them stand out on your detail views in your Revit projects. It's up to you, but you can see what a difference that makes when I bring that down a size and change the font of the text in the annotation. And again, that might be consistent with your AutoCAD standards in your AutoCAD drawings as well. So it's always worth bringing in those settings into your annotation families in your Revit projects as well. Once again, we're in our detail 001 parapet detail. And if you look at the parapet detail, you can see that we've used some red dashed line styles there to emphasize part of the parapet detail. You can do the same with your text and your annotation. So in the previous video, we set up a new text family, didn't we, with a 2.0 millimeter Calibri text family. So let's have a look at using some color to enhance our parapet detail. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select the GI flashing text there, like so. And what that does is in the properties palette over here, it tells me I'm using a text family 2.0 millimeters Calibri. So I'm going to go to edit type there in the properties palette. And I'm going to edit my 2.0 millimeter Calibri. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep the Calibri bit, but then I'm going to do a little sort of underscore, and I'm going to call this blue. So this is a blue setting. It's going to be a blue color. So I click on OK like so. All I've got to change here is the color in the graphics. So I'm going to make this a nice blue. So let's go for something like a nice palish blue like that. And I'll OK that. So that's the only thing I've changed. There's the RGB values of the color. And I've got a new family type there called 2.0 millimeter Calibri blue. I click on OK. It escapes deselect, and that is now blue. Now you'll notice that the leader line also goes blue because that is part of the text family. That's one of the benefits of Revit annotation text is the leader is part of the text. You can have a leader, you don't have to have a leader. It's entirely up to you. If I select the text again, you'll notice it's up here. I can remove that leader if I want to. or I can add a leader, and so on. So if I remove that leader like so, it's there, I can click and bring it back there, and what I can do is obviously place the arrowhead where I want it to go again, so that's down here on the flashing, and then I click and drag and line that in like so. When I hit escape deselect though, as you can see, the leader line is still blue. It's part of the text family. So what I could do now is I could select all of the other bits of text, like so, and I'll change them to my blue setting here. Hit escape deselect, and they're all blue. But can you see how that colour makes that text and the leader lines stand out from the rest of the detail? And that's where Revit's really useful with colour. And you'll find that a lot of people don't use a lot of colour in their Revit projects. And colour is a great visual aid. And the benefit you've got there as well is it highlights everything in the detail, but also think about your standards coming in from your AutoCAD drawings as well. So you might be linking some AutoCAD drawings into Revit, and you want that text to be highlighted in a particular color. You can highlight any text in a linked or imported CAD drawing as well. Just use your visibility graphic overrides to do so. I know we're doing it here in a detail that is already Revit objects and Revit annotation, but can you see the crossover there? You can set everything up so that all of your linked or imported information is highlighted in a different color, like we've done here with this particular text family. Now, this particular text family, I've changed the color to make it stand out on the detail, and it's a good thing to do. You can see the text now stands out, and you look to the text first, and then you look where that text is being pointed to by way of the leader lines, and it just stands out. It's a nice visual aid. So utilize color in your text and your annotation in your Revit projects. It's a really useful tool and it makes things stand out. But also, remember, you can utilize that to highlight any of your AutoCAD standardized information that's coming in by way of linked or imported CAD drawings as well. We're staying in our detail 001 parapet detail, and in the previous video I explained how utilizing color for your Revit text annotation could be useful. There are also other text settings that you can utilize in Revit to again make your annotation stand out, be bold, perhaps be underlined, and so on, in the same way that you would perhaps utilize your AutoCAD text annotation with bold, italic, and underline as well. Now, obviously, the ways and means of setting those up are different, but it may be that you've got AutoCAD standard text that is bold, italic, or underlined, and you want to set up a similar type of text or annotation in perhaps your parapet detail here in your Revit project. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of this text like so, and what I'm going to do is go back to my properties here and select just the regular 2mm Calibri. Hit escape to deselect, and it's now all back to its regular black and white kind of setting. But you'll notice the difference there. It kind of merges into the detail, and those colors do assist things to stand out. But you can utilize your text settings as well. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to select the GI flashing text there, like we did previously, and there it is there in the properties palette. When I click on edit type, it brings up the type properties dialog box, and I'm going to duplicate the 2mm Calibri. And what I'm going to do this time is put an underscore there and put ALT for alternative type of Calibri text. So I'll click on OK like so. So this time I'm keeping it black. I'm going to keep all of those graphic settings, but I'm going to come down here to the text settings. And I want it to be bold, italic, and underlined. So I'll OK that. And what I'll do now is I'll hit escape, and can you see the difference there? It's now bold, italic, and underlined. So I can highlight the rest of the text. And again, go to the properties palette, and in the selection pull down there, I'm going to go for alternative for all of it, hit escape to deselect. And again, I'm highlighting the text and the annotation in the detail by using different settings. Now, again, I've done that on kind of a global scale there in the parapet detail, but it may be that you want to put a piece of text underneath the detail to give it a name, for example, and you want that to be bold, italic, and underlined. Again, create a family type for that. Place the text in the detail. But also, again, you can see how you can relate this back to your AutoCAD standards. If you've got text that is using bold, italic, or underline, and using different fonts, sizes, etc., you can see how easy it is now to bring across those settings and set them up in your Revit project. Now, you wouldn't just do it piece by piece like I've done here. What you would do is you'd create a Revit template with all the same standard settings as you may have in your AutoCAD drawings that you're also utilizing to develop your Revit project. But you can see how quick and easy it is to do. It's not difficult. You just have to have a different workflow process and utilize your family types in your system families in Revit. We're starting another chapter now in our course, and we're going to start looking now at working with fill patterns in Revit in a bit more detail. Now, fill patterns in Revit are similar to hatching in AutoCAD. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at how fill patterns can replicate the standards that we might have in some AutoCAD drawings that are also being used and linked perhaps to our Revit project. So we've got a new Revit project for you. It's called Office Reception Area.rvt. And whilst it's not new as you've seen it before in other chapters, make sure that you download the RVT file for this particular chapter. Make sure you've got the right one. And once you've got it downloaded from the library and you've opened it up in Revit, make sure that you go to the floor plan 00 ground. And you'll notice that we've got a fill pattern over here, sort of top left. So if you zoom in on that now, you'll see that we've got a fill pattern in that particular area there already. So you can see there that a filled region has been placed to highlight that particular room in the 00 ground floor plan. So make sure you've got the right Revit project, make sure you're in the right view, and then zoom in to that fill pattern in the 00 ground floor plan. Then what we'll do as we work through the chapter, I'll show you how to work with fill patterns and replicate what you've already got in perhaps some AutoCAD standard drawings already. So we're in our 00 ground floor plan and we've zoomed into that fill pattern top left. You can see it there on screen. And we're obviously in our office reception area.rvt file, as I mentioned in the previous video. So you should have downloaded that from the library, as I mentioned, and you can see what you can see now. So what we need to think about is editing our fill patterns in our Revit project. And what we want to think about is how we approach that, and more importantly, how do we replicate what we've already perhaps got in our AutoCAD standard drawings that we may be linking or importing into our Revit projects. So let's have a look at that. So what we need to do is go to the Manage tab on the ribbon in Revit, and we go to the settings and we go to additional settings, and you'll notice there's fill patterns there. Now we have covered this a little bit already, but this is how you edit your fill patterns and set up new fill patterns in your Revit project. So I'm going to click on fill patterns there, and it'll bring up our fill patterns dialog box. I'm just going to drag that over to the left a little bit here so that we can still see this fill pattern here. Now, you can see that we've got different types of fill patterns. So if we look at the drafting pattern types, you can see that they're sort of hatchings and cross hatches. You've got some block work, some aluminium, and so on and so forth. But you can see that they are what is classed as drafting pattern types. So they're the sort of thing, if you were working on a drawing board back in the day, that you would utilize to highlight elements by hand-drawn drawing. That's the whole idea. And then if we go to the model pattern types, you can see that these are more for modeling and perhaps creating standard details. You might create some drafting views and you want to highlight areas. So you've got rectangular parquet flooring, you've got masonry, and these are more sort of what I would call modeling type fill patterns. You can use either in a fill pattern, it doesn't matter, but the whole idea is that you want to highlight the elements in your Revit projects, in your floor plans, in your elevations, in your sections, utilizing these fill patterns. Now, the benefit you've got is you can edit any of these fill patterns at any time. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change my settings here on this fill pattern here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to click on cancel there, and this is a filled region. Can you see that? I hover over, it's a filled region. So I click on it, and it highlights like so. So this is my filled region vertical. If I go to the properties palette and go to the selector there, the type selector, I'm using vertical filled hatching. Now you'll notice that these filled regions are using different types of fill patterns. So if I went for a diagonal crosshatch, you'll see it changes like so. That's a different family type. So if I want to edit any of these fill patterns on any filled regions that I may be using, what I can do there is obviously apply those fill patterns to any region. And what I can do is edit the families. So it's a bit like when we were looking at annotation and text in one of the previous chapters. So there's my diagonal crosshatch filled region. I go edit type, and you can see there that I can edit and select my fill pattern that I want to use, like so. And I can duplicate and rename and start creating other fill patterns. So that's what we're going to start looking at now. So let's look at editing this particular filled region. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to duplicate. And what I want here is perhaps a solid red fill to highlight that particular room. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to rename it. I'm going to call it solid and underscore red, like that. So that is now my filled region. I want a solid red filled region. So I click on OK. The foreground pattern color there, I want that to be red, obviously. And I'll change the background pattern color. Look, there is one, but I'll make that red as well. And then I need to change the foreground fill pattern here. So I click here like so, and I want a solid fill. So as I come down, you'll see that I've got all different ones there in the drafting. There's the solid fill right at the top. So I go solid fill, okay, and it adds the solid fill drafting setting there. So I'll OK that now, and when I hit escape, you'll see that is now a red solid filled region. Now that's fantastic for highlighting areas in your floor plans in Revit, but you might also have a similar system running in your AutoCAD drawings. So again, you can look at your AutoCAD drawings, decide on what is there, and then apply that to your Revit projects as well. But that's how quick and easy it is to edit fill patterns and edit those filled regions that you utilize those fill patterns as well. So we're staying in our 00 ground floor plan in our Revit project. And what we're going to look at now is creating a new fill pattern. And then we'll use the filled region command to obviously highlight that pattern in our ground floor plan. So we go to the Manage tab on the ribbon and we go to Additional Settings and then to our fill patterns. Now, again, I've got this sort of top left so that you can still see what's going on in the floor plan. And what we can do is we can create a new fill pattern. Now, this is where, again, you can relate this back to the standards in your AutoCAD drawings that might be getting used for your Revit project. The whole idea is that you've got the ability to replicate the same fill patterns that might be getting used for hatching in older AutoCAD drawings that might be used for this project, or they might be linked or imported. So what sort of pattern type do you want? Do you want a drafting pattern type or a model pattern type? So you come down to the bottom of the fill patterns dialog box, and there's a little icon here, new fill pattern. I'm just going to drag this over to the right-hand side so that we've got a little bit of screen real estate going on. And you can see here that it's asking for a new pattern name. So I'm going to call this diagonal red. And I might put an underscore and then red in capitals. It's entirely up to you. You might get a totally different type of name, but I'm just being fairly sort of literal here. So it's a basic pattern. I can create a custom pattern if I want to, like that, where I can start changing the settings and obviously start browsing for other patterns as well. So what I can do, I can look for PAT files. Now, PAT files are what is used in AutoCAD for hatch patterns. So you can see that you can actually import in as well the hatch patterns that you may be using in AutoCAD drawings too. So there's all these different ways in Revit of making sure that your standards in Revit adhere to your standards that you may have used previously in AutoCAD. Now, I'm not going to create a custom one. I'm just going to create a basic one in this case. And as you can see, we're using parallel lines. If I wanted to use crosshatch, as you can see, you've got crosshatch going in both directions. I want parallel lines. The line angle is 45 degrees, and the line spacing is 3 millimeters in this case. That should be fine. We can easily change it if we need to. But I need to go back now to put the new pattern name in again, because where I've clicked on changing the settings, it's gone, you've changed it. It might be a different pattern name. So I'm going to put this in again as diagonal, and then underscore red, like so. Now, that pattern there is in, and it's diagonal red, like so. So I'm going to click on OK now. Now, bear in mind, there's no color setting there, and I'm calling it diagonal red. Now, the reason I'm doing that is I want it to relate to something else in a moment that we're going to set up, and that's our filled region, because our filled region that we're going to use is also going to have a color. So I want the pattern to align to the region. If you get my drift, you'll see what happens in a moment. So what I'm going to do there is use diagonal red as my fill pattern. I'm going to click on OK. So that then goes into the system. There's my diagonal red there. And you can see that we've got a diagonal up 3 millimeters, which is the same settings, but it's just got a different name. And I've named it differently. That's my new pattern. So there's diagonal red in the fill pattern list. So I'll click on OK, like so. Now, when you start creating your filled regions, your regions are part of the system families in Revit. So what I'm going to do now is zoom in closely on this room here. And I want my filled region to fill this room here. Now, I'm going to go back to the Annotate tab on the ribbon, like so, and there's region there. And I go filled region. Now, I can select any filled region I want. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select a diagonal up, like so. And I'm just going to select that one purely to show you how this works. And I'm just going to cheat a little bit in the draw panel. I'm going to select rectangle, and I'm going to go from this corner here and just take it up to, say, that corner there like that. And then I'll click on the green tick, and there's my filled region. Now I'm using diagonal up at the moment, but I want it to be a red diagonal filled region. At the moment, if I hit escape, you can see it's obviously just black and white like so. So there's my filled region there. So what I can do now is go edit type, and I want a new type of filled region. So I duplicate, and I'll call this, surprise, surprise, a diagonal red, like so. Click on OK, and I'm going to change the fill pattern there to my diagonal red. I'll go and find it in the list. There's diagonal red, like so. So I'll OK that first. Diagonal red drafting. I change the color to red now in the filled region family, like so. I'll change the pen color as well, the background one, like so, and everything else I'll leave as is. So I click on OK now, and when I click away from that now, you'll see it's red. But the benefit I've got there now is I've created a new fill pattern that relates directly to the filled region system family. And that's kind of how you want to approach it when you're bringing in any AutoCAD standards as well. Name the fill pattern to the same name as what you've got in your AutoCAD drawing, but then also relate that to a new filled region family that you might possibly have a prefix or a suffix ACAD somewhere, so that they are then seen as AutoCAD fill patterns and filled regions as well. So that's how you create a new fill pattern and obviously adapt it to a filled region in your Revit projects. In the previous video, we generated a new fill pattern and utilized it in a filled region, as you can see on the screen at the moment. What we're going to do, we're just going to zoom out slightly and just pan up a little bit, just so we can see the room below. Now, what we're going to do in this particular video is duplicate a fill pattern and use it for another filled region. And what you'll see is then the difference between the two. And again, more importantly, if you've got hatches in AutoCAD that perhaps adhere to these different settings, you can obviously duplicate existing fill patterns in Revit to match the hatches that you might be using in AutoCAD drawings, linked or imported CAD files, etc. So let's go back to our Manage tab. We're going to go to Additional Settings again and go to Fill Patterns. And what we're going to do, we're going to go and find in our drafting pattern types our diagonal red. So if we come down a bit, there's our diagonal red there. So I select it, and you'll notice now that I've got this little icon here, duplicate fill pattern. I can also, if I want to, delete fill patterns. Be careful with that one, because if you delete a fill pattern that's been used for a region, obviously that can cause issues in Revit. We want to duplicate our fill pattern. So we duplicate it, and there's our diagonal red 2. Now, I am going to use the 2, but I'm going to lose the space. And the reason being is, if you remember in AutoCAD line types, when you were using line types, there was a line type that was the general line type. Then there was a line type 2 and a line type X2. A line type 2 was normally either twice as big or half the size. So a line type 2 in AutoCAD line types was half the size. So I'm going to change the line spacing, like so there, to 1.5 millimeters, like so. And you can see in the preview, it's a denser fill pattern. So I'm going to leave everything else as it is and click on OK. And there's my diagonal red 2. And you can see in the preview there that the spacing is different. That's all I've changed. So there's diagonal red 2. So I'll click on OK, like so. Now, what I want to do is add another filled region to this room here in the floor plan. So I'm going to go to the Annotate tab on the ribbon, and I'm going to go to the Detail panel, click on the flyout, and I want a filled region, for example. Now, I'm going to cheat again and use the rectangle, like so, and I'm going to come from this endpoint here over to that endpoint there. So there's my filled region. Now, before I click on the green tick, though, I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to come down, and you see I've only got my diagonal red filled region at the moment. So if I hit escape once and go to edit type, what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the type that I want, which is diagonal red in the list, and then I'm going to duplicate it, and again I'm going to change the name like I did with the fill pattern to diagonal red 2. Change my fill pattern here again to diagonal red 2 as well. And that means the spacing will be different. Everything else will remain the same. So I'll OK that. There's my red 2 there. I'll OK that. And what I'll do now is I'll click on that green tick. And if I just hit escape to deselect there, can you see the spacing is different? Now, obviously, there are other ways of highlighting rooms and spaces. There's color legends available to you in Revit as well that allow you to actually utilize rooms and spaces and generate room legends. But it may be that you've got a linked CAD drawing come through. And what you want is you want your filled regions here in your Revit floor plan to replicate what you've got in AutoCAD. Now, obviously, the AutoCAD stuff does come through as imported categories, but it just comes through as basically a line projection setting. What you want is something in Revit that you can edit and update accordingly. So, for example, your walls might change positions on your linked CAD file, and you want these walls in Revit to change, but you also want the filled region to change. And the benefit you've got there is that filled region is completely editable and easy to manipulate in Revit, rather than try and go into imported categories and change the linked CAD file and so on. You can do that in Revit straight away using your fill regions and your edited fill patterns. That's why those fill patterns are really useful in Revit. Not only are they great for highlighting areas in a floor plan, but they can be adapted to suit previous AutoCAD standards.